The marble silence of Arlington was unshakable until the senator arrived. His black limousine screeched to a halt at the edge of the sacred grounds, scattering tourists and drawing glares from the veterans who knew this place was not meant for noise. The man who stepped out was no ordinary visitor. He was a millionaire senator, sharp suit gleaming, ego taller than the columns of the memorial. He adjusted his cufflinks like he owned the ground he walked upon. But there, standing motionless, was a figure who did not flinch. The tomb guard, stone-faced, rifle at his shoulder, shoes striking the path with the rhythm of eternal honor. He had walked this line through storms, funerals, and silent dawns. He was trained never to speak, never to falter, never to break discipline. The crowd sensed something brewing. Parents pulled their children closer, whispering, "Don't disturb him. This is sacred." Yet the senator smirked, his voice slicing through the stillness. "Do you know who I am?" he barked, his words dripping arrogance. The guard did not blink, his eyes fixed forward, his every breath measured, his every movement precise. The silence felt heavier than any reply could ever be. For a heartbeat, everyone thought the senator would walk on, that he would respect what thousands before him had respected. But instead, he stepped closer. His polished shoes grinding against the solemn path meant only for the guard. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A veteran clenched his fist. A reporter lifted his camera. A child, no older than 8, whispered to his mother, "Why won't he stop?" The tension cut like a blade. The senator's arrogance collided with the immovable stillness of the guard. Two worlds stood face to face, one built on ego and power, the other on discipline and sacrifice. And in that frozen moment, the crowd realized this was no ordinary confrontation. What would unfold here would not just test a soldier's silence, it would test the very weight of honor against the greed of power. The senator leaned in, eyes narrowing. The guard remained still, carved from duty itself. A storm was about to break, because soon, the tomb guard would not only defend the sanctity of the unknown soldier, he would stand against a man whose secrets, once revealed, could shatter an empire. And the world was watching. The tomb guard was not always the unshakable figure the world now saw. Beneath the immaculate uniform, beneath the razor-sharp salute, was a man whose journey had been carved through fire. His name was Staff Sergeant Daniel Cole, a veteran who had once carried not just a rifle but the unbearable weight of war. In Afghanistan, he had seen the kind of chaos that bends men until they break. His closest friend, Private First Class Mason Reed, had fallen in a firefight that lasted less than 3 minutes, but haunted Daniel for years. Mason's last words were simple, whispered through cracked lips, "Don't let them forget us." Those words became Daniel's compass. When he returned home, restless and hollow, he sought purpose. That purpose found him at Arlington. To guard the tomb of the unknown soldier was not merely a post-it, was a vow, a living promise that the fallen would never be erased by time. Every step he took on that sacred mat was a silent tribute to Mason, to the unnamed, to all who never came home. Daniel's life narrowed to discipline. Rain, heat, snow, none of it mattered. His shoes struck with perfect rhythm, his rifle gleamed, his salute was flawless. Tourists might see stillness, but in Daniel's heart, each motion was alive with memory. Each step said, "I remember you." And across from that sacred vow stood a man who represented the opposite of sacrifice. Senator Victor Harrington. Harrington was a creature of privilege, born into wealth, polished in Ivy League halls, and sharpened by decades of backroom deals. He had risen to power not through service but through manipulation. His smile could charm cameras, but behind it was a hunger that gnawed endlessly. Lobbyists lined his pockets, corporations owed him favors, and now, whispers circled Washington, whispers of corruption, of secret accounts, of a scandal waiting to erupt. But Harrington was not a man easily cornered. He played with influence the way a gambler plays with cards, bluffing, boasting, always doubling down. He believed nothing could touch him, until, unknowingly, he crossed paths with a soldier who feared nothing but dishonor. The location of their collision was more than symbolic. The tomb of the unknown soldier was not merely marble and stone. It was hallowed ground, drenched in tears shed quietly by mothers, fathers, and comrades. Here, silence was not emptiness, it was respect. Every step of the guard's 21-pace march mirrored the 21-gun salute, the highest military honor. Here, time itself bowed. And so, when Harrington strode onto that path, it was not just a physical trespass. It was an insult to generations. To every nameless soldier whose body was never identified, to every family who buried an empty casket. The crowd knew it. The veterans felt it deep in their bones. Even the children sensed it. though they could not name why. Daniel Cole's stillness was not born in that instant. It had been forged long before in desert sands, in battlefield smoke, in nights where grief swallowed him whole. He had learned to master silence not because he lacked words, but because words could never be enough. The senator, meanwhile, had mastered only performance. His speeches thundered on the Senate floor, dripping with patriotic phrases, yet his private life told another story. He invested in companies that profited from wars he had voted to prolong. He shook hands with generals on camera, then mocked their sacrifices behind closed doors. That day, Harrington had not come to Arlington for reverence. He had come to display power, to remind the cameras that he, too, could stand near symbols of sacrifice even though he had never bled, never served, never buried a comrade. His limousine's arrival was choreographed, his press aide lurking nearby, ready to spin the moment into another political asset. But Harrington had underestimated one thing. He thought the tomb guard was decoration, a ceremonial soldier, mute and mechanical, an ornament of tradition. He did not realize that beneath the rigid uniform stood a man who carried scars deeper than politics could ever reach. As the senator smirked, as his words cut the air, the tension tightened like a bowstring. The veterans in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. A mother pressed her son's shoulders, whispering, "Remember this, son. Remember what respect looks like." Daniel did not move. His training forbade, his honor demanded it. And yet, behind those stone-set eyes, his mind flickered with memory. He saw Mason again, saw the dusty battlefield, heard those last words, "Don't let them forget us." Perhaps that was why he stood taller in that moment, why his jaw tightened, why the shine of his rifle caught the last rays of sun like a blade. He knew this confrontation was not about him. It was about them, the nameless, the fallen, the ones who had given everything without demanding anything in return. And Senator Harrington, he did not see it. He could not. Power had blinded him long ago. To him, Daniel Cole was just another uniform, another silent man he could belittle, another chance to prove that no tradition, no sacred ground, no soldier could outshine his authority. But Harrington was wrong, fatally wrong. The stage was set. On one side stood a man of discipline, forged by sacrifice. On the other, a man of greed, swollen with pride. The world had not yet seen what would happen when they clashed. But the first sparks were already burning in the eyes of the crowd, in the whir of the reporter's camera, in the hushed prayers of veterans who had seen too much to stay calm. This was no ordinary day at Arlington. This was the beginning of a storm that would not just rattle the silence of the tomb. It would tear open secrets buried far deeper than stone. The senator's voice broke the stillness like glass shattering on marble. "Do you hear me, so? I asked you a question." Harrington's tone was not of curiosity but command, the kind that assumed compliance. The guard did not answer. His eyes were fixed, his posture flawless, his body a living statue carved out of duty itself. The silence was heavier than the words. Mothers pulled their children close. Veterans crossed their arms, jaws clenched. A hush fell over the tourists, broken only by the faint click of cameras as reporters tried to capture the tension unfolding in real time. One elderly veteran, leaning on a cane, muttered under his breath, "Don't do this, Senator. Not here." But Harrington only smirked. He loved the attention. The lenses, the eyes on him, it was fuel. He took another deliberate step onto the sacred path. The very mat the guard's boots had worn into perfection over decades of ritual. His polished shoe crushed into it, an act so brazen it sent a ripple of outrage through the onlookers. "Look at me when I speak to you," he sneered. "You're a public servant. That means you answer to me." Still, no response. The guard's discipline was absolute. The silence began to work on the crowd in unexpected ways. To the veterans, it was a quiet defiance louder than any insult. To the children, it was confusing why didn't the soldier push back. To the reporters, it was golden drama, an unfolding clash between sacred duty and unchecked arrogance. Their lenses zoomed in, their microphones strained to catch every word, every sound of Harrington's escalating performance. The senator mistook the silence for weakness. He leaned in closer, his expensive cologne cutting through the air. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" His laugh was cold, sharp. "Or are you just another brainless body in a uniform, trained to obey?" Gasps. A veteran's wife clutched her chest, whispering, "He didn't just say that, but he had." And Harrington wasn't done. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms as though delivering a speech. "This is what our tax dollars pay for. Ladies and gentlemen, a soldier who can't even speak, can't even respond to a simple question. Is this what honor looks like? Is this what discipline means? A statue, a puppet." Murmurs spread through the gathering. Some shook their heads in disgust. A few tourists, too distant to grasp the weight of tradition, chuckled nervously. But the veteranzo rigid, their faces burning with anger. They knew what the senator was doing. They had seen arrogance before, but rarely had it been this shameless, this public. The guard remained still. The weight of generations sat on his shoulders, and he bore it without flinching. He was not trained to argue. He was trained to endure. And yet, the escalation grew. Harrington circled the guard like a predator testing prey. He walked slowly, his Italian shoes scraping against the stone, deliberately loud in the silence. He leaned close to the guard's ear, his whisper a venom meant for all to hear. "Tell me, soldier, when you wake up in the morning, do you ever wonder if you're wasting your life pacing back and forth like a wind-up toy?" A reporter's camera clicked. A child began to cry. The veterans shifted closer to the rope barrier, their fists tightening, as though ready to step in if the line was crossed. Any further stillness, silence, discipline. The guard did not move, but Harrington's arrogance thrived on resistance or the lack thereof. He pressed harder. He gestured at the guard's rifle, scoffing. "What's this for? Decoration? Do you even know how to use it? Or is it just part of the costume?" Gasps again. The crowd was no longer just uncomfortable. They were enraged. A murmur of disgrace rippled through. Someone shouted, "Show some respect." Another veteran barked, "This isn't your floor, Senator." But Harrington thrived on provocation. He waved them off with a smug grin. Respect. Respect is earned. And what has he done? He marches in circles. He stares at nothing. He guards a box of bones no one can even name. That was the breaking point for many in the crowd. A little girl burst into tears, her mother glaring daggers at the senator. The old man with the cane shook his head, whispering, "God help him if he touches that guard." And yet Harrington stepped closer still. Inches away now. His shadow merged with the guard's, arrogance colliding with immovable duty. He raised his hand not to strike, but to test. He waved it slowly in front of the guard's eyes, mocking the stillness. "See? Nothing. He's not a man. He's a machine. He can't do a damn thing without orders." The silence was deafening. Even the birds seemed to pause midst. The air itself grew heavy. The veterans bristled. The reporters leaned in. The children clung to their parents, and Daniel Cole, the tomb guard, remained still. But behind those eyes, a storm brewed. He remembered Mason. He remembered the oath. He remembered why he stood here, why he endured, why silence was not weakness but strength. And yet Harrington wasn't done. He pulled a pen from his pocket, the kind used to sign bills and contracts, and held it just above the guard's shoulder. "Maybe I should autograph your uniform, give you some real value. What do you say?" The crowd erupted, gasps, shouts, outrage boiling over. One veteran shouted, "That's enough." A reporter's voice rang out, "Senator, stop this." But Harrington only smirked, his hand lingering inches from the pristine uniform. The tension had reached its peak. The line between insult and assault had thinned to nothing. Every soul present felt that something was about to give, and in that instant, the entire weight of the moment crystallized. The arrogance of unchecked power stood toe-to-toe with the silent might of discipline. The crowd held its breath. The cameras rolled, and time itself seemed to stall. One more move, one more word, and the storm would break. The pen hovered dangerously close to the tomb guard's shoulder, its gleam mocking the solemn shine of his uniform. The crowd was frozen, their outrage boiling but their bodies paralyzed by the weight of what might happen next. And then it happened. Senator Victor Harrington pressed the pen against the guard's immaculate sleeve, dragging it with a small but deliberate stroke. A thin line of ink streaked the sacred uniform, black on crisp white. The gasp that followed was deafening. A child shrieked. A veteran roared, "Enough." One woman covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The senator smiled, basking in the chaos he had caused. He spread his arms like a showman who had just delivered the final act. "See, nothing, not a word, not a move, just a wind-up doll in uniform." But then something shifted. The guard's boots struck the marble with a sound like thunder. One precise step forward, deliberate and sharp. The rifle at his shoulder swung with flawless discipline, snapping into position with a metallic click that sliced the silence in half. The crowd gasped again. But this time in awe, Senator Harrington froze. His smirk faltered. For the first time that day, his bravado cracked. The tomb guard's voice, deep and commanding, erupted into the air with the power of a cannon. "Step away from the tomb." It was the first sound he had made all day. The words carried not just volume but authority, the weight of centuries of sacrifice, of an oath sworn to the unknown. His tone was not angry, not emotional, it was absolute. The senator stumbled back a step, his arrogance colliding head-on with a force he could not comprehend. The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in silence so profound it felt holy. Every eye was locked on the guard. Every ear rang with the echo of his command. Harrington tried to recover, scoffing nervously. "You think you can order me? I'm a United States Senator. I outrank you in every way." The guard did not move. His eyes, like steel, fixed on the trembling man before him. His voice came again, sharper, louder, unshakable. "This is sacred ground. Show respect." Reporters fumbled with their cameras, capturing the moment. Veterans saluted instinctively. Children stared wide-eyed, witnessing history etched before them. Harrington's arrogance faltered further. His hand, still holding the pen, trembled. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked under the pressure. This is outrageous. He threatened me. Did you hear that? He threatened a senator. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Not anymore. They had seen the truth. The senator had crossed the line. The soldier had defended not himself, but the honor of the unknown. An elderly veteran shouted from the back, his voice shaking with fury. "That man's done more for this country standing still than you've done in your whole life, Harrington." The crowd roared in agreement. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. "Senator Harrington, why did you disrespect the guard? Senator, is this how you honor the fallen? Senator, do you think the public will stand with you after this?" The senator's face twisted. His carefully maintained mask of charm and control had been ripped away. He was exposed small, arrogant, humiliated in front of a crowd that had turned against him. He jabbed a finger at the guard, desperate to reclaim dominance. "You think this is over? You'll regret this. Do you know who I am?" But the tomb guard didn't flinch. His stillness was more powerful than any insult, his silence more cutting than any retort. The rifle at his side gleamed like a blade of judgment, his posture unbreakable. Harrington, sweating now, stepped back further, his bravado drained, leaving only desperation. He barked to his aide, "Get the car now." But it was too late. A police officer, summoned by the commotion, pushed through the crowd. "Senator Harrington," he said firmly, "you need to come with us. There have been multiple complaints of assault and public disturbance." The crowd erupted in cheers. Veterans saluted the guard. Parents lifted their children onto their shoulders to witness the moment. Reporters shouted into cameras, narrating live what was quickly becoming the scandal of the year. Harrington's face went pale. You can't arrest me. I'm untouchable. This is political theater." He provoked me. But the officer's grip was iron. He turned to the guard, nodding with respect. "We'll handle it from here, soldier." Daniel Cole gave no response. He returned to his post, his body settling back into the rhythm of duty. He had not acted for applause. He had not spoken for recognition. He had done only what honor demanded. The contrast was blinding. Harrington, red-faced and shouting, dragged toward his limousine. The tomb guard, silent and composed, resuming his eternal march. The crowd knew what they had just witnessed. Not just a clash of egos, but the revelation of truth. Arrogance collapses when faced with discipline. Power crumbles when tested by honor. As Harrington disappeared, his voice fading into the chaos of reporters and police, the silence returned to Arlington. But it was a different silence, now charged, reverent, unforgettable. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "He's a hero." His mother, tears in her eyes, nodded. "Yes, son, that's what a hero looks like." The guard marched on. The rifle gleamed. The steps echoed. And though the world outside Arlington buzzed with scandal, here, within the sacred silence, tradition held firm. For the first time in years, Daniel felt Mason's words echo in his heart, not as a burden, but as a fulfilled promise. "Don't let them forget us. No one who witnessed this day would ever forget." By the time Harrington was escorted from Arlington, the crowd had grown into a living witness to the collapse of arrogance. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing relentlessly. Every step the senator took was documented, every word twisted into headlines before it even left his lips. "Senator Harrington, do you admit to disrespecting the tomb guard?" shouted one journalist. This is outrageous. It's a setup, I demand." Harrington sputtered, but the words fell flat. They were drowned by the collective outrage of veterans, families, and tourists who had watched the unfolding spectacle. From his post, Daniel Cole did not move. Not a muscle betrayed him. The rifle remained steady at his side. His eyes scanned the crowd only briefly, not because he sought attention, but because the duty that defined him allowed no distraction. Yet even in his silence, he radiated power, an unspoken message that honor and discipline had triumphed. Harrington's limousine doors slammed, the chauffeur's gloved hands trembling slightly as he ushered the senator in. But no amount of wealth, influence, or security could erase the humiliation already etched into the world's consciousness. Videos were live-streamed across news outlets and social media feeds. Within minutes, hashtags erupted. Hashtag TombGuard Triumph. Hashtag Harrington Humiliated. Hashtag Honor Over Arrogance. Millions watched, sharing clips of the exact moment the pen had touched Daniel's uniform, and the soldier's single, commanding voice had restored order. The public reaction was immediate and relentless. Political analysts debated Harrington's behavior, calling it a catastrophic misjudgment. Opinion polls showed a dramatic drop in his approval ratings. Calls for investigations into his past dealings began to circulate. In that brief, explosive confrontation, a man who had believed himself untouchable discovered that true power resides not in wealth, but in character. Yet Daniel never basked in the limelight. He returned to his post with the same calm precision that had defined him for years. Each step echoed through Arlington's marble paths, a silent cadence that spoke louder than any speech. Veterans saluted. Children watched in awe. Cameras continued to roll, capturing not only the senator's downfall but also the serene resilience of the tomb guard. A reporter, awestruck, whispered into his microphone. He didn't just defend a uniform. He defended an idea, a legacy, a promise that even the richest and most powerful cannot buy or break. Nearby, a little girl tugged at her father's hand. "Why doesn't he get angry?" she asked. Her father smiled, eyes moist. "Because he knows something most people forget. Strength isn't loud, strength is quiet, unyielding. That's what makes a hero." Harrington's aides tried damage control, sending out statements to spin the story. Senator Harrington was engaging in a routine ceremonial visit. One read, but the footage told a different story. The senator taunting, mocking, and crossing a line that millions had now witnessed. There was no spin that could erase the reality. On social media, clips looped endlessly. Analysts dissected every frame. Some focused on the guard's calm expression. Others zoomed in on the streak of ink on his uniform, a mark of disrespect transformed into a symbol of restraint and justice. Memes began circulating, comparing arrogance and entitlement to the unwavering discipline of the tomb guard. Within hours, the story had gone viral worldwide. Meanwhile, Arlington itself seemed to return to its normal rhythm. Tourists resumed their steps. Veterans saluted as they passed. But the energy in the air was forever changed. A sense of awe lingered. Witnesses knew they had seen something historic. A soldier had defended not just a tomb, but the very ideals it represented. Daniel Cole remained motionless, rifle gleaming in the sun, eyes forward. The world could watch, judge, and praise. But he did not move for recognition. He moved for honor, for the fallen, and for the promise he had carried silently for years. And for a fleeting moment, as the crowd slowly dispersed and the cameras clicked one last time, the little girl whispered again, louder now, "He's a hero." And this time, the words weren't just for the child, they were for the entire world watching. In that viral, unrepeatable moment, the lesson was clear. No amount of money, influence, or status could outweigh integrity. No arrogance could withstand discipline. No power could topple honor when it stood unwavering. The tomb guard had faced the impossible and untouchable. Senator and emerged not only victorious, but untarnished. The world had witnessed the triumph of principle over pride, of stillness over chaos. And in every frame, every clip, every shared moment online, the silent soldier's message rang clear. Tradition is not weakness. Discipline is strength. Honor endures. The crowd had dispersed, leaving Arlington bathed in the soft golden glow of late afternoon. The echo of boots on marble still lingered in the air, a silent testament to what had just unfolded. Daniel Cole remained at his post, every movement measured, every breath deliberate. The tomb guard's march resumed, unchanged, unshakable. Yet inside, a quiet satisfaction filled the spaces that years of discipline had carved into him. A colonel, tall and stern, stepped forward and saluted. "Well done, Sergeant," he said simply. There were no accolades, no fanfare, just acknowledgement from someone who understood the weight of duty. Daniel returned the salute, head held high, posture flawless. Nearby, the little girl who had whispered hero earlier approached, clutching her mother's hand. She hesitated for a moment, eyes wide with awe, then whispered again, barely audible over the soft wind, "Thank you for standing up." Daniel's gaze softened, just for an instant. He looked down at his dog tags, the metal worn and scratched from years of service, and remembered Mason. He traced the edges with his thumb, recalling the battlefield, the smoke, the cries, the promise he had made long ago. Don't let them forget us. Today he had kept that promise. A breeze stirred the leaves of the trees surrounding the memorial, carrying with it the quiet hum of respect. Veterans in the distance saluted once more, as if the world itself acknowledged the day's events. Reporters continued to document, but their voices seemed distant now, their stories secondary to the enduring image of a man who had refused to bend. Daniel's mind wandered to the streak of ink on his uniform, a mark of disrespect that had been transformed into a symbol of resilience. It would be photographed, analyzed, perhaps even framed. But to him, it was nothing more than a reminder that honor was tested not in comfort, but in moments of provocation. That discipline was proven not through obedience alone, but through the courage to remain steadfast in the face of arrogance. He lowered his eyes briefly to a small note tucked into his breast. Poquita message from a fellow veteran he had received years ago. Courage is quiet. Heroism is stillness. Daniel smiled faintly. He had lived that truth today. Around him, Arlington exhaled. The day's tension dissipated, replaced by reverent calm. Visitors walked past in hushed tones, some whispering stories of what they had witnessed. A new respect had settled over the memorial, subtle but unmistakable, as though the very stones themselves recognized the victory of principle over pride. Daniel adjusted his uniform and returned his rifle to the shoulder position, resuming the ceremonial march. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, steady, unyielding, a rhythm older than any headline, older than any viral video, older than any politician's ambition. The little girl waved from a distance, her mother nodding proudly beside her. Daniel's gaze met hers briefly, and in that silent exchange, more was said than words ever could. Gratitude, recognition, understanding. She had witnessed history not in the collapse of a man's ego, but in the quiet triumph of honor. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the marble, Daniel allowed himself a fleeting moment of reflection. The world outside would buzz with Harrington's humiliation, with viral clips, with social media praise. But here, in this sacred space, the true victory was intangible, measured not in views or retweets, but in the enduring weight of duty fulfilled. He touched his dog tags one last time, whispering softly, "We remembered, we honored, we endured." And with that, Daniel Cole resumed his march, steady, silent, unbroken. The tomb guard had not only defended the unknown soldier, he had defended something far greater, the timeless principles of courage, discipline, and honor that no wealth, no title, and no arrogance could ever shake. For those who had watched, who had listened, who had witnessed the stillness in the storm, the lesson was clear. True strength is quiet, true heroism endures, and the legacy of one man's discipline can echo far beyond the marble walls of Arlington, touching hearts across generations. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, Arlington returned to its timeless rhythm. The tomb guard stood unwavering, rifle gleaming, boots striking the marble with the same unwavering cadence. But the story of that day had already rippled far beyond the memorial walls, reaching screens, hearts, and minds across the world. Narrator voiceover. Tradition is not weakness. Stillness is strength. Courage does not roar, it endures. And sometimes, one silent act of honor can speak louder than 1,000 words. The world had watched a soldier face the arrogance of power and emerge unshaken, proving that discipline and integrity are forces that no money, title, or ego can overpower. Videos went viral, veterans saluted, and children whispered the word hero as if they had just witnessed something sacred. But for Daniel Cole, this was never about recognition. It was about something far deeper, the promise made to the fallen, the memory of friends lost, the oath to preserve honor in a world that too often forgets its meaning. Every step he took, every silent moment he held, was a tribute to those who had given everything and expected nothing in return. Narrator voiceover. In a world full of chaos, there are those who stand firm, those who remind us that some things, discipline, duty, honor, cannot be bought or broken. They endure quietly, steadily, for all to witness if they only choose to see. As Arlington's shadows stretched long and the crowd dispersed, one truth remained clear: heroism is not always loud. Sometimes, it is measured in silence. Sometimes, it is measured in a steady gaze, a perfectly timed step, a refusal to bow to arrogance. And now, the story lives on, not just in headlines or viral clips, but in the hearts of those who saw the power of honor standing unshakable against greed. Narrator voiceover. Final line. Share this story. Subscribe. Remember that some battles are fought without words, and some victories are etched not in noise. But in the unwavering stillness of those who serve with true courage, the tomb god resumed his eternal march, each step a heartbeat of history, a lesson for the world. Integrity endures.